Okay, so okay, so Vineet is saying that people are watching the recording. Okay, thanks for informing me. Yeah, I mean, it would be better if people attend the lectures, but uh, yeah, well, since I haven't really enforced the requirement of attendance, uh, I guess there is not much incentive for attending the lectures. So anyway, so let's begin today's lecture. Okay, so in the last lecture, we just to briefly recap, right? Uh, so we looked at this notion of ambiguity in grammars, right? So given a context tree grammar, right, we said that it would be ambiguous if there is a string which has multiple parse trees, and this notion of ambiguity has a very practical application, right? So when we use context tree grammars in order to express program syntax, right, then we require it would be rather from the point of view of a compiler, right? Uh, it is required that a string only has one parse tree, right? Because that parse tree would basically give the structure of the program. And if you can have multiple parse trees, right? Then as we saw using the example of expressions, if the same expression has multiple parse trees, uh, then the compiler won't be able to generate the correct assembly code, right, or low level code. So that's why ambiguous grammars are sort of not useful, right, from a practical perspective. And hence, we saw one strategy of how to remove ambiguity in a grammar, which is by introducing additional non-terminals and uh, using the precedence of operators, right, in the specific case of expressions, right, in order to remove the ambiguity in a precise manner. Okay. Uh, and then we also saw this concept of uh, how to express a regular language, right, in the form of a context-free grammar. So all regular languages are context-free languages, which means that if you're given a regular language, right, then you can generate or you can come up with a context-free grammar whose language would be this regular language. Right? And there is an automated way to do this, right? So given the DFA of so if you're given a regular language, you know there exists a DFA, right? And from the DFA, you can automatically generate the context-free grammar. Uh, and we saw that this particular context-free grammar for regular languages has the grammar rules have a specific form, right? Which is that all of the grammar rules, right? So if you look at the two grammar rules here, right? So all of the production rules, they begin with, so they are either epsilon or they begin with a terminal symbol and then they have another non-terminal, right? So we can generalize this and consider, so if you generalize this, then what we get is a right linear grammar, right? So in the right linear grammar, all the productions are of the form A generates WB or A generates W, right? Where W is a terminal string. So basically, the body of every production rule is either a terminal string, right? Or it has a single non-terminal, which is on the right side. And there's a one-to-one correspondence between right linear grammars and regular languages, right? In the sense that if you take a regular language, its grammar, its CFG is going to be a right linear, and conversely, if you have a right linear grammar, then the language that it accepts is exactly a regular language. So you can construct a DFA from the right linear grammar. Right? We won't do that. Right? So okay, so there was a question in the last lecture, right, that are right linear grammars ambiguous or not, right? So I had said that they are not ambiguous, but that's not true. So right linear grammars can also be ambiguous. So, so just to illustrate this, right? So let's consider this simple grammar, right? So let's say A generates AA, uh, uh, or A, and then A generates epsilon. So this is a right linear grammar, right? Because all the production rules, or the body of the production rules either have terminal strings, right? Or they have a single non-terminal, which is on the right side. Right? But if you look at the string A, right? So there are two. So this the language of this grammar is just the string A, right? And it basically has two parse trees, right? So you can either use the production rule. S generates A and then epsilon, or you can directly generate A itself. so it's not necessarily true that right linear grammars are unambiguous. Right? So they can also be ambiguous, but you can obviously remove this ambiguity and come up with an unambiguous grammar for in this particular instance. Right? So I think so. The way to think about ambiguity, right, is in terms of non-determinism. So if you think about say an NFA, so in an NFA, we know that if a string is accepted, right, then there could be multiple ways in which the string is accepted. Right? So there could be multiple paths from the start state to a final state through which the string is accepted. Right? Similarly, in an ambiguous grammar, right, there could be multiple production rules. Right? There could be multiple parse trees that would result in a string being present in the language of the grammar. Right? However, an NFA has the same power as a DFA, but that's not necessarily true for ambiguous and unambiguous grammars. It's that unambiguous grammars accept lesser number of languages, right, than ambiguous grammars. So the languages that are accepted by unambiguous grammars is not the entire set of context free. So as we just saw in the last lecture, right, where there was a context free language which was inherently ambiguous, right, which means every grammar is ambiguous. Okay. Right. So are there any questions from yesterday's lecture? Okay. So in that case, let's begin the next topic. Okay, so now we are going to look at normal forms for context-free grammars. So in fact, right, so we have already seen one type of form, right? So what a normal form does, right, is that in general, a context-free grammar, we don't really restrict the body of production rule. Right? So we say that a body of a production rule can be any string of terminals and non-terminals. Right? But we saw that in right linear grammars, for example, there was a specific format that the body had, right? That it can only have a single non-terminal and it must be on the right side. So it must be at the end of the string. Okay? So now, so in this topic, right, we are going to see other normal forms for context-free grammar. So in particular, we're going to see the Chomsky normal form for context-free grammar, which is also going to constrain what can be there in the body of a production, right? The format of string that can be present in the body of a production. So the reason that we are interested in normal forms, in particular in the Chomsky normal form, is because it gives us more structure. So we want to we want to say something about context-free languages. So just like we had closure properties, decision properties for regular languages, we also want to find out properties about context-free languages, right? And by restricting the grammars that generate those languages to a specific form, we can more easily reason about this property. So that's why we will first look at what are these normal forms and how to get a normal form for a context-free grammar or for a context-free language. So as can be seen in the slide, right? So there are multiple steps that we will have to take, right, before we actually reach the normal form. Okay. So let's go through those steps. Okay. So the first simplest step, right, is that if you are given a context-free grammar, right, and any arbitrary context-free grammar, then the first thing that you can do, right, is that you can focus on those non-terminals that don't derive any string, okay? And you can get rid of those non-terminals. So for example, let's look at this particular grammar. So this has three variables, S, A, and B, and there are the production rules are S derives AB, and then A derives small a or A, and then B derives A, B again. So is there a non-terminal in this particular grammar which doesn't derive any terminal string? So if you're interested, so the language of context-free grammar is the set of all terminal strings that you can derive, beginning from the start symbol. So the question is there a non-terminal in this CFG which doesn't derive any terminal string? in the sense that if you begin from that non-terminal, you can apply the production rules, but you will never get a terminal string. So is there such a non-terminal here? Okay, so Kostab and Vineet are both saying B. So okay, so let's look at B here. So if you start from this non-terminal B, then the only rule that you can apply is this AB, and then you can keep on applying this rule, right? But you will never be able to get rid of this non-terminal B itself. So that's why, so that's correct, right? So B, so from B you cannot derive any terminal string. From A I can derive a terminal string, right? Which is this small a itself. Okay. So I'm assuming, of course, that the sigma, right, is equal to small a here. Okay. So therefore, the small a is part of the alphabet. Okay. But there is another non-terminal from which I can't derive any terminal string. So that's S itself. Right? So if you look at S, then I cannot derive any terminal string from S because any derivation involving S, right? The very first production rule that you would have to use would be AB, and once you get B, you cannot get rid of B. So that's why S also is another non-terminal from which I can't derive any terminal string, which means that the language of this CFG is actually empty. So A derives all strings of A's, small a's, but B doesn't derive any terminal string. Similarly, S also doesn't derive any terminal string, and therefore the language is empty. So given any arbitrary CFG, right? How do we find out whether or not a non-terminal derives a terminal string or not? So the ultimate aim, right, is to remove all of those non-terminals from the language or from the grammar, because removing them doesn't really affect the language of the CFG itself. Because if a non-terminal doesn't derive any terminal string, then it can be safely removed, right? And all the production rules involving such a non-terminal can also be safely removed. So how do we test whether or not a non-terminal derives some terminal string? So we can use a simple inductive strategy, which is that we basically, so at the base case, right, we consider all production rules of the form A generates W. So this is a production rule where on the body of the production rule, right, has a terminal string itself. So in this case, A definitely generates a terminal string, right? A definitely derives a terminal string. Okay. So this is the base case, right? So we consider all production rules where the body of the production rule is a terminal string, in which case the head of the production rule, right? We can definitely say that that head is going to derive a terminal string. And then in the inductive step, right, we look at some arbitrary production of the form A derives alpha, okay? And then where alpha can consist of both terminals and non-terminals. Okay. However, if every non-terminal in alpha is also known to derive a terminal string, then we know that A is also going to derive a terminal string. So basically, we look at all the non-terminals in the body of the production rule, which is alpha, and if each of those non-terminals is known to derive a terminal string, then A is also going to derive a terminal string. And therefore, we add A as well to the set of terminal strings, to the set of non-terminals which derive a terminal string. So by this way, we can find out all of the non-terminals which derive a terminal string, and therefore the remaining non-terminals, right, are guaranteed to not derive any terminal string, so you can get rid of them. So if we can apply, so we can also apply the algorithm in this particular example. So here, right, the base case would correspond to the production rule A generates A. So I can say that A definitely derives a terminal string. But after that, right, I look at the remaining production rules. So I look at this production rule. So here A derives a terminal string, but B is not known to derive a terminal string. Right? So therefore, I cannot conclude that this B is also going to derive a terminal string. And similarly, in this production rule, right, A is known to derive a terminal string, but B is not known to derive a terminal string. That's why S is also not known to derive a terminal string. So that's why A is the only non-terminal that is known to derive a terminal string. And we can't say that the other, so the other non-terminals, therefore, so this implies that the other non-terminals are guaranteed to not derive a terminal string. So that's how we can find out all the, so this is an algorithm, right? So we can automatically find out from the production rules which terminals derive a non-terminal, sorry, which non-terminal derive a terminal string, and which non-terminals do not derive a terminal string. So we can easily prove the correctness of this algorithm as well. So what's the correctness statement, right? So the correctness statement says that if the algorithm outputs that some non-terminal A derives a terminal string, then A actually derives some terminal string. So we can use induction on the steps of the algorithm, right? So in the base case, we definitely know that the base case says that A derives some terminal string W. Right? So in that case, we definitely know that A derives a terminal string. And then in the inductive case, we can assume, right, that all the non-terminals in the on the body of the production rule generate or derive terminal strings, and therefore A would also derive a terminal string. Okay. And the other step is that if A derives some terminal string, then the algorithm will definitely output it. So here we can use induction on the length of the derivation of the terminal string. So I'm not going to go through these proofs in detail. Right? So you can sort of do this on your own, right, as homework. So now that we know which terminals or which non-terminals can derive a terminal string and which non-terminals cannot derive a terminal string, we can then eliminate all the non-terminals which derive nothing, right? Which means we do not derive any terminal string. So essentially, we just apply the algorithm, right? So we apply the algorithm to first find out all non-terminals, derive a terminal string, and then for all other non-terminals, uh, which are known to definitely derive nothing, right? We can simply remove all the productions in which they appear either on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side. And the resulting grammar is guaranteed to have the same language as the original grammar. So let's do this on an example, right, to make this more clear. So this is another example of a CFG. So here once again, right? So the small uh, so alphabets which are small, right? They are from they are terminals, right? So here sigma is A and B, and the set of non-terminals, right, are S, A, B, and C, and C is also there in sigma. So these are the production rules, and so the first step is to apply the algorithm to find out all those non-terminals which are known to derive a terminal string. Okay. So so which are the non-terminals here which are known to derive a terminal string? Okay. So C definitely derives a terminal string. Right? So we can apply the steps of the algorithm, right? So C derives a terminal string. Uh, And then from the base case, right, since A derives A, therefore A also derives a terminal string. And then I can apply the inductive step, right? So I can say that S generates C. Right? So there is this production rule S to C, where I know that C is known to derive a terminal string. Right? And therefore S is also known to derive a terminal string. Okay? So so we can't say anything about B because there is only one production rule which involves B, and we don't know, right? So B is not known to derive a terminal string, and that's why we cannot add B. So C, A, and S are all those non-terminals that will derive a terminal string. So which means that B is the only non-terminal that is guaranteed to not derive a terminal string. Okay. So once we know, right, that B is the non-terminal uh, which is guaranteed to not derive any terminal string, I can remove the production, right, which basically involves B, right, either on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side. So I can remove this particular production rule, and I can also remove this production rule. So finally, the grammar that I'll get is S generates C, uh, A generates AA or A, and C generates C. So this grammar has the same language as the original grammar, and it's obtained by basically eliminating all those non-terminals which do not derive a terminal string, which in this case is B. Okay, so Sanchit is asking that S also had AB. It also does not derive a terminal string. Yeah, so that's what we said, right? So once we know that non-terminal, in this case B, is known not to derive any terminal string, I can remove any production rule which involves that particular non-terminal, either on the left hand side or on the right hand side. So that's why I can remove this production rule as derives B. Because if you use that production rule, right, I mean, you will never be able to get rid of B, right, which means that you will never actually get a terminal string using that production rule. So that's why I can safely remove it. Okay. So is that clear? Are there any more questions? Okay, so since it's asking why was it classified with A and C in the start? So I'm not sure I understand your question. Right? So what do you mean classified with A and C?
Sir,
Yes.
like basically we choose all the production rules which lead to a terminal string, right?
Yes.
So because C and A directly led to a terminal string, we chose them,
Yeah.
but we
Yes.
also classified S with it, but S had
Yes.
AB and we didn't know about B till then.
No, no. So I use this S generate C, right? So there is also this rule, S generate C. So, so remember that the inductive step, right, for identifying these non-terminals which derive a terminal string says that if you have any production rule of the form A generates alpha, and if every non-terminal in alpha is known to derive a terminal string, then A is also known to derive a terminal string. So in this case, from the base case, I know that C generates a C derives a terminal string, right? And there is this production rule S generates C. So that's why I can also say that S is going to derive a terminal string. So is that clear? Yeah. Okay. So remember that way. So we are just following the steps of the algorithm. Right? So we first find out all of those production rules where the body is just a terminal string. And then we look at other production rules which obey this property, right? That all the non-terminals are known to derive a terminal string in the body. And in this way, we find out all of the non-terminals which are known to derive a terminal string, and then the rest of the non-terminals can be removed. Right? So any production rule involving the rest of the non-terminals can be removed. Yeah, so I think this is saying the same thing. So this is the grammar that we get at the end. So we have removed all the production rules involving B. So obviously, if you look at this grammar, right, there is another optimization that you can do. So, which is that so there is this particular production rule, right? Uh, A generates A or A, right? So this A is never reachable from S. So if you want to find out the language of this CFG, right, we look at all the strings that I can derive from S. But in any derivation from S, I can never reach this particular non-terminal A. So I can also get rid of this non-terminal A and any production rule which involves it. Right? So that's what we will do in the next step. So we will then search for unreachable non-terminals. So a non-terminal deserves to be eliminated if it cannot appear in any derivation from the start symbol. So how do you find all of such unreachable non-terminals? Right? So again, we can use a very simple inductive strategy. So the base case is that we start with S itself, which is the start symbol, the non-terminal. So we know that S cannot be removed, right? Because S itself is obviously reachable, and we want to find out all the other non-terminals which are reachable. So then the inductive step is very straightforward. So so if we can reach some non-terminal A, and if there is a production rule of the form A derives alpha, right, or A generates alpha, then we consider all the non-terminals that are present in alpha, and we can reach all of those non-terminals as well. So we will add those non-terminals which are present in alpha in the set of reachable non-terminals. And so in this way, we will find out all the terminals which are reachable. Sorry, all the non-terminals which are reachable. And when we complete this process, right, all the other non-terminals which are not present in this set of reachable non-terminals will be unreachable. So you can safely remove them. So again, we can prove by induction, right, that this procedure identifies all and only those non-terminals which are present in a derivation from S. So, so the procedure that we discussed in the last slide, it is so every non-terminal that it identifies will be reachable from S, and it's also going to identify all non-terminals which are reachable from S, which means they're present in some derivation from S. So again, I'm not going to do this proof, but you can again use induction. So you have to use induction on two different parameters, right, in order to, for both directions. So there are two directions in this proof. One is the all direction, and the other is the only direction, and we will have to use induction on two different parameters, right, to prove this. So once we know all the non-terminals which are reachable and which are unreachable, we can then remove from the grammar all the non-terminals that are unreachable, so that are not discovered reachable from S. And not only that, we can also remove them from all productions. So we can also remove all productions that involve such unreachable non-terminals. So let's say that some non-terminal is unreachable, right? So such a non-terminal can appear either in the head of the production or in the body of production, right? So can it appear in the body of a production rule as well? So I'm talking about non-terminals which are not reachable from S. So once I find out that such a non-terminal is unreachable, is it possible that such a non-terminal be present in the body of a production rule? Okay, Vineet is saying it will not be in the body of a reachable production rule. That's right, but I'm just asking. Yeah, so that's true, right? But but will it be present in the body of some production rule? So since it is not present, yeah. So since it is not present in the body of a reachable non-terminal, but it could be present in the body of an unreachable non-terminal. In which case, yeah, in which case that particular production rule can also be removed. So let's so in the example, right? In fact, we will actually go to that example now, right? So so such a non-terminal, right, is basically called a useless non-terminal. So a non-terminal is useful if it appears in some derivation of some terminal string from the start symbol. Okay. So you begin from the start symbol, and then after some a sequence of steps of derivation, you reach some terminal string, which will be in the language of the grammar. So I consider all the non-terminals which can appear in any of the intermediate derivation steps for the derivation of any terminal string beginning from the start symbol. Okay. So all of those non-terminals are called useful, and the other non-terminals are called useless non-terminals. So you can immediately see, right, that a non-terminal which doesn't derive any terminal string, which we saw in the first part of this lecture, right? So such a non-terminal is going to be useless, right? Because it is never going to appear in the derivation of a terminal string from the start symbol. And similarly, a non-terminal which is not reachable from the start symbol, that's also useless, right? Because it's also not going to appear in derivation of some terminal string. Right? So in fact, these are exactly the useless non-terminals. So yeah, so those are the useless non-terminals, and we can eliminate useless non-terminals by following the two steps. Right? So we first eliminate non-terminals that derive no terminal string, and then we eliminate all the unreachable non-terminals. So if you perform these two steps, then you've basically cleaned up the grammar. Right? So you've gotten rid of all the useless non-terminals. You've gotten rid of useless production rules, and the resulting grammar will have the same language as the original grammar. So any questions so far? Okay, so we can try to so we can apply this notion of useless non-terminals, right? In this particular example, this is the same example that we saw in the previous slide as well. Right? So in particular, right, we found out that C, right, A and B, sorry, C, A, and S. These non-terminals are known to derive terminal strings, but B is not known to derive terminal strings. So I can get rid of B. Right? And I can also get rid of this production. So I had this particular grammar. S generates C, A generates A over A, and then C generates C. So this was the grammar that was obtained after removing all non-terminals and production rules, which which basically involve non-terminals which don't derive a terminal string, which in this case is B. So after this, I can get rid of all those non-terminals that are not reachable from S. So again, the base case is that S is reachable from S, right? And since I have production rule form S generates C, therefore C is reachable from S, and that's all, right? So A is not reachable from S, so that's why I can get rid of A, and I can get rid of any production rule which involves A, which is this particular production rule. So the grammar that I will finally get is this S generates C, and then C generates C, and this is the grammar. So this grammar is obtained after removing all useless non-terminals, which are A and B, and it has the same language as the original grammar. So an important thing to note here, right, is that the steps, right, are important, right? In particular, the sequence of the steps is important, right? So you must first eliminate all those non-terminals which are known to which don't derive a terminal string, so which derive nothing, and then you must eliminate all the unreachable non-terminals. So you can't swap both of these steps. So in this original grammar, right? So in this original grammar, right? If you were to, for example, first remove all the unreachable non-terminals, right? So if you were to swap the steps, right? So let's say we first remove all the unreachable non-terminals, and you will find that both A, B, and C are reachable. Right? So that's why none of the production rules will be removed, and then you are going to remove all of those non-terminals which don't derive a terminal string. Right? So which in this case is B. So B is only non-terminals, right? So you then remove these two production rules, but then the resulting grammar that you get, right, is not, it still has a useless non-terminal, which is this A. So that's why the steps are important. The sequence of the steps is important. So you must first remove all of those non-terminals which are known to derive nothing. And this step may actually create or generate more unreachable terminals, right? Non-terminals, right? So that's why in the next step you remove all the unreachable non-terminals. Right? So in this case, right, when we remove this particular non-terminal B, which is known to derive nothing, right? So then we find out that A becomes unreachable. Right? So even though A was reachable in the original grammar, but it became unreachable, right? After the first step. Right? And that's why we can remove A as well. But if you swap the steps, then you won't be able to remove it. So yeah, so if you eliminated unreachable symbols first, then you will find that everything is reachable, and therefore A would never get eliminated. Uh, so you might ask, yeah, is it possible that we would generate a non-terminal that derives nothing after the second step? So that's exactly the question that I'm coming to next, right? So let's say that you derive, so you first remove all the non-terminals which derive nothing, then you remove all the unreachable non-terminals. Is it possible that after that, right, you may actually find some non-terminal, right, in the resulting grammar which may derive nothing? Okay. So that is not possible actually. So uh, the reason is that so let's see what is the reason, right? So we know that after the first step, right, every symbol, every non-terminal that is remaining is known to derive some terminal string. Okay. And then after the second step, we know that the only symbols remaining, right, they are all reachable from S. Uh, so, so is it possible, right, that after this, right, there may be some other, so there may be after step two, right? Is it possible that there is some non-terminal A, right, which doesn't derive anything, right? So which doesn't basically derive a terminal string. Uh, so why is that not possible? So remember that after step one, right, we removed all the non-terminals which derived nothing, right? So at that point, right, this A was actually deriving some terminal string, right? Yeah. So okay, so let me do this, right, and then maybe you can share your ideas for it. So after the first step, we know that A, right, was basically deriving some terminal string. Okay? Now after that, the only thing that we did in the second step was that we removed uh, all the strings that are all the non-terminals that are unreachable from S. Okay, so which means that so if we actually had removed some particular non-terminal, right, which was unreachable from S, okay, after the second step, and because of that, right, we are saying that A is not able to derive a terminal string, but that is not possible, right? Uh, so the reason is that so they basically still derive a terminal string because such a derivation can only involve symbols which are reachable from S. Okay. Uh, so is that clear? Okay. Uh, yeah. So Vineet, can you share your intuition as well? Is it the same thing?
Sir, what I wanted to say is like, suppose A was like A derived something, A derived a terminal before the step two. Now
Okay.
A is not deriving a terminal after step two. It means that
Mm-hmm.
A A used a non-reachable non-terminal to derive the terminal. Since removing that made it,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But A is still reachable, right?
yeah, and
So
A is
which means that that particular non-terminal would still be
was
reachable.
reachable
So
as
which
well.
means that, yeah, so therefore any derivation, right, would basically involve symbols which are reachable from S.
Yes,
So that's why after step two, right, you will not be able to find a non-terminal, right, which you can remove, and as a result of which you will get this non-terminal from which you can't derive a terminal string. So yeah. So okay, so the argument is that if A, right, after the step one, right, I know that A is going to derive only, A derives a terminal string. Okay. Now after step two, right, if I remove all the unreachable symbols and A is still present, right, that means that A is still reachable from S, which means that any symbol that is reachable from A, right, is also going to be reachable from S, right? Uh, and that means that if the original symbols that were reachable from A are still going to be reachable, right, are still going to be present after we remove the after the step two as well. So that's why they will continue to remain. So yeah, I mean, this is slightly tricky to work out. So maybe everyone can go home, right, and try to figure this out on their own. Right? And if there are any questions, then obviously we can come back to this. Okay, so okay, so at this point, right, what have we done? Right, so we have cleaned up the grammar. Right? So we have removed all the useless symbols, all the useless non-terminals from the grammar. So we have removed non-terminals which don't derive any terminal string, and we have removed non-terminals which are not reachable from the start symbol. So there is one more. There are actually a couple more steps that you can do in order to make the grammar even more cleaner. And the first is to remove epsilon productions. So we can almost avoid using productions of the form A generates epsilon. Its epsilon productions are productions where the body of the production rule is just epsilon. So we can almost, right? So we remember that we are saying that we can't always avoid using productions of the form A generates epsilon, but we can almost avoid them. It's in particular if the language itself, right, contains epsilon, then there has to be an epsilon production, right, of the form. There has to be some epsilon production. Right? So which means that epsilon cannot be present in the language of any grammar that has no epsilon productions. So what we are saying is that let's say that you have an epsilon production in a grammar. Okay. Now, if the language of that grammar itself contains epsilon, then there is no way to get rid of all the epsilon productions. Right? However, if the language of the grammar does not contain epsilon, then I can remove the epsilon productions. So that's what we will show. So we'll show that if L is any context-free language, then L minus epsilon. So epsilon may be present in L, it may not be present in L, right? But L minus epsilon is guaranteed to have a context-free grammar which doesn't have any epsilon productions. So that's what we will show, right? We'll begin from a language L, which is a context-free language, and it's a context-free grammar, and we will show how to remove epsilon productions in a manner such that we may remove the string epsilon itself, right? But all the rest of the strings will still be present. Right? So the resulting grammar, after removing all the epsilon productions, its language will be L minus epsilon. Uh, so uh, so so let's consider this basic question, right? So if there is an epsilon production, right, is it always safe to just remove epsilon productions, or do we have to do something more? So let's say that by removing epsilon productions, right, I am basically allowing epsilon to be removed from the language. That's fine. But will any other string also be removed from the language if I just remove all the epsilon productions? Okay, so here is an example, right? So A generates AA or epsilon, right? So this particular, so I'm assuming that A is the start symbol. Then this grammar has an epsilon production, and its language also contains epsilon. But if I remove this production, let's say if I remove the epsilon production, then the original language, right, also contains the string A. In fact, it contains all strings which contain A. Right? Yeah, but after removing epsilon, its language will be empty, right? So you can't get rid of. Yeah, it won't generate any terminal strings, right? Its language will become empty, and A will basically become useless. So that's why we can't just directly remove epsilon strings, right? We have to do something more, right? So we have to add other productions if you want to remove epsilon strings. If you want to remove epsilon productions and still make sure that the language remains the same modulo this epsilon itself. So towards that end, right? So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to find out all the non-terminals that can generate epsilon. So these are called nullable non-terminals, right? So in order to eliminate epsilon productions, we first need to discover this nullable non-terminals. Right? So these are non-terminals such that they generate epsilon. They only generate epsilon. So they basically derive the string epsilon. So obviously, if you have a production rule of the form A generates epsilon, then A is nullable. And again, you can sort of inductively find out, right? So this would be the base case, right? And then if you have, let's say, some production rule, right, of the form A generates, let's say, x1, x2 up to xn, where all of these xi's, right, are non-terminals and they are also known to generate epsilon, then A is also known to generate epsilon. Right? So that would be the inductive case. So yeah, so the base case is that if there is a production of the form A generates epsilon, there is a production rule of the form A generates epsilon, then A is nullable. And if there is a production rule of the form A generates alpha, where all the non-terminals in alpha are nullable, then A is also nullable. So note that I should mention that alpha, right, doesn't contain any terminals, right? So it's just a string of non-terminals, and all of them are nullable. So this is how we find nullable non-terminals. So that's the very first step of the algorithm. So let's do this on this example. So here, right, again, I will write down what is sigma, right? So sigma is A and B, and the set of non-terminals is S, A, and B. So which are the nullable non-terminals here? So I can apply the algorithm, right? So let's consider the base case, right? So the base case would say that, so there is this production, epsilon production, yeah, all are nullable. So that's right. So A is nullable, that's from the base case. Okay. And then I have this production rule B generates A, right? So that's why B is also nullable. And then I have this production rule S generates AB. So since A and B are both nullable, therefore S is also nullable. So all the three are non-terminals and nullable. So once again, you can prove that this algorithm to find nullable non-terminals is correct, which means that it finds all and only the nullable variables. And the proof would be very much like the proof that we did for algorithms, for the algorithm for symbols that derive terminal string. Find out all of those non-terminals which derive terminal string. Right? So you can use the same proof strategy in order to prove this particular algorithm is correct as well. And once we have found out, right, which are the nullable non-terminals, right? So now this is the key step, right? So as we said, right, we can't just remove all the epsilon productions, right? We also need to add some other productions, right? So what are these other productions that we need to add? Okay. So the idea is that if you have a production of the form A generates x1 dot xn, okay, then from this production, right, I'm basically going to, so for each production of this form, I'm going to generate a family of new productions, right? And this family of new productions will be added to the grammar. Okay. So in particular, I will take each subset of nullable xi's, right, in this body of the production. So for every subset of nullable xi's, I'm basically going to just remove those, right? And the resulting production rule is going to be added. So we will basically have a production where those subset of nullable xi's for every subset are eliminated, right, from the right side. So they are eliminated from the body in advance. Okay. So it may be possible that all of the xi's are nullable. Right? In which case, if you eliminate them, you make it epsilon, but we don't do that. Right? So if all the xi's are nullable, then we do not make a production with epsilon as the right side, right, or as the body of the production. Right? But otherwise, we take every other subset of xi's which are nullable, and we simply remove those, right, and get a new production. So let's illustrate this using an example. Right? So this is the so let's consider this particular grammar. Okay. So here you can quickly find out what are the nullable non-terminals, right? So here A, B, C, and in fact S, right? All of them are nullable, right? So once we find out all the nullable non-terminals, I take every production rule, right? And from every production rule, I'm going to generate a family of new production rules, right? So let's take this production rule. Right? So here in the body of this production rule, there are three non-terminals, A, B, and C. All of them are nullable. Right? So I'm going to take every subset of A, B, and C, and I'm going to simply eliminate them, and I'll get a new production rule. Right? So for example, I can take A. Right? So I will get the production rule S generates BC. Right? Similarly, I can take this B, the subset B, so I will get AC. I will take the subset C, so I'll get AB. And then I'll take the subset AB, right? So I'll get C. Similarly, I'll get B and I'll get A. Okay? And obviously, the original production rule is still there. So these are the new production rules that we have added, right? By eliminating this nullable non-terminals in advance. Okay? So we eliminate every subset of nullable non-terminals in advance, right? Except that we don't consider the entire subset, right? So we don't consider A, B, C itself, right? So we don't add this S generates epsilon because we're trying to get rid of epsilon functions. Right? So similarly, I do this for every other rule as well, right? So for A generates AA, right? I look at the body of the production rule so that has A, which is nullable. So therefore, I will eliminate it. Right? So I'll get A generates A. Sorry. So this was there originally, okay? And then since I've eliminated this capital A, I will only get small a. So similarly, I do this for B generates BB as well, right? So BB and epsilon are already there. Since this B is nullable, so I will remove it. And similarly, I have for C, I simply have C generates epsilon. Right? So far we haven't removed any epsilon productions. All we have done is that we have added more productions, right? Based on which non-terminals are known to be nullable. Right? And now, right? So from this grammar, right? I can safely remove all the epsilon production rules, right? So in particular, I can remove this A generates epsilon, B generates epsilon, and C generates epsilon. And then I can show that the resulting grammar, right, has the same language as the original grammar minus epsilon. So it doesn't have epsilon itself, but it's going to have every other string. Okay. So yeah, so that's the procedure for basically removing epsilon productions. So we will also prove this formally, right? But since I don't have time now, so we'll end the lecture today. But in the next lecture, we'll prove formally, right, that this procedure, right, basically produces a grammar which has the same language as the original grammar minus epsilon. Okay. So thank you, everyone.